I am relatively new to preterism and am aware of some of the serious differences between Ed Stevens and Don Preston that has emerged from the debate between them concerning the rapture. I believe the soteriology of covenant eschatology is in serious error with its collective body view of the resurrection. However, after listening to Ed Stevens expressing his individual body view of the resurrection, it seems reasonable to me that the rapture could well have taken place immediately after the Great Tribulation of the Church conducted by Nero and levelled at the Church between 64 and 66 AD, followed by the parousia, the days of vengeance and the general resurrection of the dead ones out of Hades, and the rapture of the living saints, which was the gathering of the saints by the angels at that time. The days of vengeance and great wrath was poured out upon apostate Israel during the siege and destruction of Jerusalem and her temple. These were the days of vengeance referred to by Jesus in Luke 22:21. This was the parousia and coming of the Son of Man, followed by the general judgment of the living and the dead. At the resurrection, those that slept in the graves were raised, and with the raptured saints given their new individual glorious bodies, like unto the Lord Jesus Christ's glorious, resurrected, ascended body that is now in heaven today. And so after the rapture of the church, there were no living Christians on earth, anywhere in the world, to preach or teach the gospel, only those who had a nominal view of Christian and religious thinking. No people to inherit traditional views from the apostles, or so-called church fathers, or any so-called apostolic successors having authority. No Christendom, for the apostles were all gone, and no living left alive persons to succeed them. The church must have begun again on the earth by the Spirit himself working or quickening individual men who needed to be born again in order to see these things, and as they began to read the scriptures which had been left behind by the apostles, and as can be seen by the reading of writings of those from that period, there was not much understanding of the sovereignty of God as taught in Ephesians, election and predestination, or the doctrines of grace that came at that time. This came with time. It is this matter that I find wrong with covenant eschatology that is expressed by Don Preston. It is missing. Their soteriology is wrong, and it's for this reason that Ed Stevens stuck with his point about the nature of the death that was threatened to Adam, and or it being carried out in the substitution of the blood sacrifice of the animal, along with the coats of skin given them for a covering. It's astonishing to me that you, Lance, find this was time wasting and that you have no patience with it. All of those believers after AD 70 were all ignorant of the rapture and the teaching of the second coming, just as anyone today who would take up their Bible. There was no tradition passed down to them, as there was no Christians to pass on any tradition after AD 70. They had to start from scratch, using the Old Testament and New Testament scriptures alone, in just the same way that you and I had to when we were first converted. In my case, it was 1970. At that time, I did not know about the parousia, could not have worked out the second coming of Christ myself, so it was left until I was able to look into these matters, and this came after I understood the soteriology that was taught during the Reformation and since. My testimony is this soteriology as that expressed in the Confession of Faith held by the 1644 second edition London Particular Baptist Confession of Faith. It is a most reasonable set of articles of religion and classified by some as High Calvinism. Accessed by the link below, and as you are aware, the eschatology expressed and taught here is historic and futuristic, and for this reason I believe it is a good and reasonable thing to write or rewrite the eschatology of this confession in order to correct it. Perhaps you could help. As I say, I'm new to preterism and have come across all kinds of strange beliefs among so-called preterists, some denying the creation of the world in 6 days and the worldwide flood of Noah and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah for its sins. But I'm learning. And anyone coming from a church background having articles of religion that are futuristic will have real problems of conscience once they see the issues we're speaking about. That is why I published Difficulties Associated with Articles of Religion Among Particular Baptists, as all particular Baptists, or Anabaptists as they were called by the Peter Baptists, in the UK were reformed in their soteriology and futuristics in their eschatology, as can be seen in the 5 sets of articles of religion that I have listed and published in this book. By the way, Frank, when you use the word restoration, do you mean reformation? Gill, by the way, spoke of the day of the Lord in AD 70, and he was a Protestant. See Luke 21, verse 22, Matthew 24, 29. As for represented preterism, why is it necessary to point to anyone as its representative?